Hi, this is the old guy. Today we're gonna talk APS-c versus full frame and why I think that the new APS-c is full frame cameras and the new exotic full frame is the medium format. The top tier APS-c bodies are cheaper than the top tier full frame bodies, but the specs are not equal. APS-c bodies without the specs of the full frame bodies, then you can get cheaper APS-c bodies. I'm filming on the CVE10 now, the original version, but if you want the same features in APS-c as in full frame, I would argue that there's not much price difference. If you count in lenses, none at all. Let's start with the camera bodies. Let's take Sony because that's the cameras that I'm most used to. Be civil if you don't agree with me, and be civil if you agree with me. You can leave all the comments you want as long as you're civil. As example, the 6700 from Sony and the A7C II as I own. I don't own a 6700 because I think this is a better buy. A7C II and the 6700 are the best example as they share almost the same features, give and take. The A7C II has active dynamic stabilization as the 6700 doesn't, and the 6700 can shoot 120p 4K. The A7C II cannot, but the 6700's 4K 120p are cropped on top of the crop sensor at about 1.5 times. And then I'll hear all of you saying in the comments, but the A7C II has a crop on its 60p too in 4K. Yes, but the A7C II shoots in crop mode, which is the same sensor size as the 6700. So if you look at it this way, there's no difference. The A7C II actually has advantages over the 6700 in crop mode. So if you look at it this way, you have a A7C II that's a better crop sensor video camera than the 6700, but is able to shoot some modes in full frame, like 24p up to 30p and all HD modes. For me, the A7C II wins, and it's a full frame stills camera. But this argument only works if this applies to the lenses too. But let's see. I'll leave a sheet on the screen with the lenses that I've compared. So that'll mean that f1.4 lens on a crop would give the same expression as a 2.0 lens on a full frame. And the first comparison, there might be a lot more examples, but to start off with, we have the newest, fastest standard zoom from Sigma for crop sensors, 70 to 40 millimeter 1.8, and Sigma themselves has a competing lens in full frame, the 28 to 70 2.8. It's not the same light gathering, but it's the same visual expression you get with the same background blur and the same separation. The 17 to 40 millimeter 1.8 on a crop sensor, weighing in at 530 grams at $900. And the Sigma 28 to 70 2.8, weighing in at 470 grams and only $750. And if you look further down the list, you'll see a lot of more other comparisons. And maybe you can find some better ones. These are the ones that just came to my mind and I just wrote down. And I will say that some APS-c lenses, in my mind, is better than some full frame lenses and vice versa. But I would say that the weight with the same background blur of two lenses are about the same, or maybe even over time the full frame lenses with the same background blur and the same separation as the crop lenses are actually the lightest ones and the cheapest ones. So what you would spend more on a full frame camera body, you might be able to save on lenses if you stick to the 2.0 or the 1.8 full frame lenses that are comparable to the 1.4 crop lenses. But some crop lenses, as I said, I would prefer over the full frame lenses, and I have crop modes on the A7C II and crop cameras, but only the crop cameras that are real cheap, like the original CVE10, because I think that camera is priced so good that it's worth getting, even though it's a crop. And the features it got are good enough for this talking head compared to many of the other choices you got. And you can get them used for about $400. But I'll put a sheet up with camera prices. If you're not into video or just a little video, I would just get the A7 III and my first pick for shooting weddings as a photographer. But if we talk lenses, Viltrox just made two lenses, and a 9mm for crop and a 14mm for full frame, actually around 170 grams. But here I picked the crop sensor because it covers a little bit more than the crop sensor, and then I can go even wider than the full frame equivalent on my full frame bodies, as I showed you in the latest videos where I used it to vlog. And if I could show you one more lens that I would actually recommend on buying as a crop, this Sigma 56mm 1.4 lens that has a beautiful rendering. And I think the choices right now for around these 90mm views are not as beautiful in rendering. Don't give me the same expression in rendering as this lens do. And it covers nearly the full frame circle too, especially in video. So as a video lens, this is awesome. I'm not trying to tell you that you should never use crop mode, but I'm trying to tell you that you should probably invest in full frame instead of crop sensor camera bodies, because it's not more expensive if you ask me. And on the other hand, you have lenses that are available in full frame mode that are just not available in crop. You have this 16mm 1.8 lens. If you needed a crop sensor lens like this, you would need a 1.2 10-11mm on a crop sensor, and that's not available right now. You have a 12mm Sigma with 1.4. That's the closest you get. And some things you get on full frame that you don't get on crop are the 1.2 and 1.4 primes. Yes, they're bigger, but you would need f-stops at 0.9 on a crop to get the equivalent. And I bet you they'll be just as big. And there's the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8, where you would need an f-stop of 1.4 to 1.8 on a crop with 24 to 100mm to get the equivalent. And I bet you it would be just as expensive and just as heavy. The Tamron only costs around $900. In conclusion, yes, full frame is the new APS-c, and it's just as cheap as the APS-c with the same features. Bye from the old guy.